All right, welcome back. Sorry for no videos this weekend. What are you gonna do? I was working. First of all, I had to visit my dad because he is my paw and he earned it. So I had brunch with him and my sister, my stepmom yesterday, and her kids and her husband. So aside from that, was working a lot on a much more important story that I have personal touch on. So sorry if there's less videos. Very difficult right now to get stuff to mirror to BitChute for whatever reason too. So I hope you're following me on YouTube. I'm going to try to get the BitChute to work because there's simply more viewership on it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the debate, the debate coming up a week from Wednesday. And you're going to see a lot of talk about it because there's a lot at stake. I think the reason that there's a lot at stake is very simple. People know that this is going to be a show, and people want the show to go their way. And unfortunately, that's not the way debates usually go. People are human. It's hard to stay on a game plan when you don't know which questions are going to be posed to you, or you shouldn't know. In some cases, people end up knowing, which is pretty, it's a pretty unfair advantage. But we'll leave that for a different day to talk about. So there's going to be two nights, June 26th and June 27th. The first night will be Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, Tulsi Gabbard, Tim Ryan, John Delaney, Beto O'Rourke, and Julian Castro. Bill de Blasio got in, and Jay Inslee. So I expect that debate to be just a little less interesting than the other one. Some of these people are going to be pretty much house ferns. John Delaney comes to mind, unless he can really get like a gotcha moment for one of the other candidates. He's just not going to. He hasn't made a real impact up until now, except for one case where apparently he was booed because of some comments he made about socialism. So it's just a fact. You have to be able to make a huge impact. So who will make an impact that first night? I would say of the people, you do have Warren, and you would probably see some real histrionics from Cory Booker, and possibly a breakout moment for Tim Ryan. Now, I know a lot of you are, if you're fans of my channel, you're going to say, well, what about Tulsi Gabbard? You talk a lot about how Tulsi Gabbard's a relatively rational person within the Democratic Party. Look, I would like her to have some, maybe a moment to talk about Russia and say, look, we have to be honest with the American people and present some transparency to them after all these years of chasing our tails and forcing America to chase our tails on this, or else we're going to be toast, because the findings simply show that the whole narrative is nonsense. It has absolutely no connection to reality. There was no collusion. There was the obstruction is one of the most this whole thing where they keep reviving things based on the Stephanopoulos interview. All of those things have very little. They don't have any bite anymore, because Mueller doesn't have a job anymore. Mueller is retired. There was recently that attempt by this other office within I think it's either the Department of Justice or one of the other federal agencies, the Office of Special Counsel, where they recommended that Kellyanne Conway be removed from the White House because she violated the Hatch Act, which was completely separate from that. So people are just grasping at straws right now for things that don't matter. There are a lot of things that you could criticize Trump for that I think plenty of Americans would have it resonate with them. And Tulsi Gabbard, if she goes on the stage and starts saying, look, I don't want to have a war with Iran. I will be the voice in the race against going to war and in favor of giving a reasoned and facts-based foreign policy, regardless of the whole thing is that you need somebody who will say, I'm going to represent the non-interventionist wing of the American political system, whether you're right wing, whether you're left wing, and Tulsi Gabbard is the perfect person. I don't know if they'll give her the chance to do it. That's the real problem. You can't just go and start shooting off at the mouth about any topic you want in the debate, because you end up looking like Marco Rubio, who was just made a fool out of by of all people, Chris Christie in 2016 in New Hampshire. That was something that I didn't see live, but I saw later in a replay, and it was pretty crazy. So, yeah, I would say the people who will probably make the biggest impact, unfortunately, are Elizabeth Warren and probably Cory Booker and maybe Beto O'Rourke. But Booker and O'Rourke would probably embarrass themselves. It's just, it's going to be a very strange evening. And, de Blasio, nobody knows what the hell he's going to do. I don't know what's going to happen. Night 2, though, will probably be a little more interesting, because you have former VP Joe Biden, Senators Michael Bennet of Colorado, who I can't believe he made it to the debate, Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, John Hickenlooper, Eric Swalwell, Marianne Williamson, and Andrew Yang. And that could be an interesting debate for a number of reasons. First of all, we will probably see whether the other candidates will actually turn their guns on Joe Biden and try to take him down. Okay, some of these people have no choice. John Hickenlooper, for example, if he doesn't distinguish himself and make like a name for himself as soon as he can, there's no point in running anymore. What the hell? Why would you keep? You can't just run this ridiculous campaign of positivity and everything. And I think that's exactly Hickenlooper's problem. You have Eric Swalwell of California. That should be interesting. Interesting in a bad way, like watching like fungus grow on a tree. That's what's going to be interesting with him. Probably one of the fakest candidates that there ever has been. And then there's going to be a lot of talk of reparations if Marianne Williamson gets even a word in edgewise. Andrew Yang, obviously a lot of very novel ideas in terms of the UBI. Some of his fans are really out of their minds, but you have to put in perspective, he's one of the few normal people who are running, at least seemingly normal. The rest of them just seem to be, come on. You have Kirsten Gillibrand who, what's the motivation to run? There's literally nobody wants Kirsten Gillibrand to be president. Michael Bennet, same idea. Some of them seem to be running for president because I guess that they may have had an ambition when they were kids that they see that there's a narrowing window for it left. So, no, I don't think that Kirsten Gillibrand is going to be a very remarkable candidate. So who's going to really dominate the evening? I think there's going to be a nice combative conversation between Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris. They're going to have to, so some of these people are going to have to fight it out. If you have a debate where people are just petting each other on the bum, it's going to be pretty boring, and people are going to ask, well, why should we tune in? There's apparently going to be another one in July. So something has to happen. The DNC probably doesn't, ideally they wouldn't want people to attack each other because, for example, I believe that a couple of these people are up for re-election. Tim Ryan of Ohio, for example, would be up for re-election. You have, some of these people are in danger of embarrassing. Cory Booker, I think, is up for re-election too. I don't know how much danger he's in New Jersey, but if you make too much of a fool out of yourself in the presidential debates, it could adversely affect your fortunes at home. Then again, New Jersey also reelected Bob Menendez, who is he's been credibly shown in an FBI evidence file to have had sex with underage prostitutes in the Dominican Republic back in the day. Now, he was apparently given a mistrial, but look, there's something there. I feel that something real has been left unfinished in that case, but I digress. Anyway, some other things to think about. Polling data right now, Sanders is still in second place for whatever reason. Do you believe in the polls? I don't know if I believe in the polls. I think it's very difficult to know. Sanders is 8 points behind Biden in Iowa, and for whatever reason, well, Warren has been on a warpath. If you'll excuse the analogy, she's on 1/10/24 of a warpath. So she's been fighting very hard, and she's up to third place in Iowa. She's up to third place in New Hampshire, above Buttigieg, he doesn't seem to be gaining any ground. She's up to third place in South Carolina in one poll, and according to another poll, she's up to second place in South Carolina. And if she does indeed survive to South Carolina and gets a vote share, then it's a real problem for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders cannot afford to have the progressive vote split. Now, this is, again, assuming that any of these polls or even one of these polls, or any or all these polls are dependable, which it's very difficult for me to accept that Buttigieg has this much support. It's difficult for me to accept that Yang has such low support. I'm not expecting Yang to be in first place, but 1% I think is a little low for Andrew Yang, because look, in South Carolina he has 3%. So I don't know what to say. It's going to be a very confusing time up until the primary, and I think if the primary finishes and you see some of the now look, it could very well be that Biden is in first place, and I could be wrong. The polls could be right, but I don't expect this order to be right. I expect some of these people who have supposedly high polling numbers, such as Warren, they'd probably end up polling half of their percentages would be cut in half. Iowa also, you have to remember, it's a caucus, so people can be drawn off of one side to a different candidate. You also have here Elizabeth Warren is downplaying the rise in the polls, and she's she wouldn't be wrong in doing that. You can laugh at her all you want, but she's not pretending that this is something to really rest on your laurels about. And then you have Beto saying that white Americans don't know the full story of slavery, and he says he's going to continue to support reparations. Well, Beto, I'm sorry, but a lot of other people already have that gimmick, so you're just going to have to get back on your skateboard and just hover along over to the Stop and Shop outside of El Paso and continue to sell weed there, because that's what you were born to do. You're not going to be president, moron. Buttigieg is condemning Biden's vote on the Iraq War. That's an interesting change. Is this a Secret Service agent? I don't know, but it's going to be interesting how Pete Buttigieg, he's kind of this crossover candidate. He's not exactly the centrist candidate, but he's not exactly a progressive candidate. So he's going to be fighting both against Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, as is illustrated here. And he says, I certainly think that vote was a mistake, and I have a different view on that conflict, Buttigieg said, according to a transcript of his remarks. Buttigieg, who served as a naval officer, also noted that the war was something he, quote, opposed as a student and continues to think was a terrible idea. Buttigieg discussed an essay he wrote as a teen expressing his admiration for Sanders, but said that he has a different approach. It's not unusual. So This is important. If you think that Buttigieg is this moderate, no, he's actually probably pretty close to Bernie Sanders on a lot of issues. He just isn't willing to admit it. It's not unusual in a moment like this to admire somebody and also find yourself competing with them, he said. But I have a different approach. I have a somewhat different message, and I represent a very different messenger. When asked by host Margaret Brennan whether he thinks Sanders' moment has passed, Buttigieg responded that he thinks the current moment calls for something new. So there's going to be a few sparks flying on the stage in or on June the 26th. I don't remember where it's going to be. But that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on Gab at Starscream85, as well as on Minds and BitChute, as well as Subscribestar if you want to donate. That's at Chef Leopard, and on Parler at Razor Ray.